So today I'm going to be doing my July mid-month wrap-up. I have read 13 books so far in the month of July, and I am going to talk about one book that I had to cut the clips out of my June wrap-up. So I'm going to talk about 14 books, but I've read 13 so far this month. So the one book that I read in June that I had to cut the clips out of was For Real by Alexis Hall. This is a male-male romance. It does have BDSM. Okay, so Sebastian, my rabbit, won't stop making a whole bunch of noise, so I'm just gonna hold him during this video. He's just gonna be a little extra. But For Real is a male-male romance with some BDSM in it. I did give it 4 stars because I felt like it was a little bit longer than it needed to be. It wasn't quite up to 5 stars for me. But this is about these 2 men, Toby and Lori. Lori is a 40-year-old submissive and Toby is a 19-year-old dominant, but he's never entered into the BDSM world before, so he doesn't really know for sure what he wants, who he is, how to go about getting what he wants. So he's new to this whole world, but Lori sees Toby at this BDSM club and is immediately drawn to him. So he goes up to him and pretty much kneels for him in this club in front of everyone. And Toby has never experienced that before. He doesn't know really what he's supposed to do. He just has these instincts that tell him he's a dominant. And so you follow their relationship, and Lori is not willing to put any emotions into this relationship pretty much. He's just wanting it to be all physical, and Toby doesn't want that. He wants someone to love him and care for him. So you follow their relationship and how they kind of navigate through that and work through their own internal battles as well. So like I said, I thought this was a little bit too long. It was very emotional, very heavy. It kind of left me feeling drained, if that makes sense, after reading it, even though it didn't have a lot of super emotional moments in it. It just felt heavy. I'm not really quite sure how else to describe it other than that. But I mean, if it's something that you think you would like, if you are interested in that, it was a good book. I don't regret reading it. I would recommend it for someone who's looking for either of those things, male, BDSM, either of those. I think it's a good romance. So definitely read it if it's interesting to you. Next, I read Making Up by HELENA Hunting. This is an adult romance. This is the 4th book in the Shacking Up series, and I gave this 4 stars. I accidentally read these out of order. I have read the 1st and 2nd one, and I thought, based on what my library was saying, that Making Up was the 3rd one, but it's actually the 4th one, and I have the 3rd one on hold, so I haven't read that one yet. But this one, Making Up, follows this woman who works at an adult toy store and this man who ends up getting the short straw pretty much and has to go pick up a bunch of toys for a bachelor party. And so he goes to this adult toy store and meets her, and he's super embarrassed and super shy and has never been to an adult toy store before and is just uncomfortable. And she kind of thinks it's endearing, but she doesn't think anything of it. And then later on, he ends up going back to the toy store to ask her out. After he had some time to think on it, he realized that he was really kind of interested in her, and so he goes back to ask her out, and that's kind of how their romance starts. I thought this was super cute. I really liked it. I did not like it as much as I liked the first 2 in the series. I gave both of those 5 stars. I only gave this one 4. This one was a little bit shorter than the other 2, so I don't know if maybe that's why I didn't connect with it as much, but still super, super good. I think it's 100% worth the read if you're reading the series, and I can't wait to actually go back and read the 3rd one and then the final one, which is the 5th one. Next, I read House of Salt and Sorrows by Erin A. Craig, or I tried to read it, I should say. This is a YA fantasy, mystery, horror mix genre type thing, and I DNF'd this at 35%. I just was bored and I didn't care about the direction of the story. It kind of got to be obviously supernatural because it is a fantasy, but I didn't like the path that it took. And so because I wasn't super invested in the story and I didn't really care that much to begin with, I just decided to go ahead and DNF this one. Next, I read Love Story by LAYNE. This is Love Unexpectedly series number 3. So this is about these childhood sweethearts who are no longer like speaking and haven't spoke to each other in many, many years. And they end up having to take this road trip together that's going to end up being 2 weeks. So they're going to be stuck in a car together for 2 weeks because they're headed in the same direction to the same place pretty much. So this is a older brother's best friend, second chance romance. They have to share a motel together, and he took her virginity and then broke her heart. This one was super good, but I did not like it as much as I liked the other ones in the series. The first 2 I gave 5 stars, but this one I only gave 4. So I still really, really enjoyed it, would still 100% recommend it. Just wasn't as good as the other 2. And these books in this series are not like companion novels or connected at all. They're completely separate sets of characters. Next, I read A Lesson in Thorns by Simone. This I gave 5 stars. I loved this. This is Thorn Chapel number 1, the first book in the series. This is about these 6 kids who spend a summer together at this place called Thorn Chapel. And they become really close, but then their parents make them leave after the summer is over. Their parents are also there at Thorn Chapel. They leave, and then 12 years later, they are pretty much like summoned by the owner, who is one of the children from the original 6. He inherited the estate, and they are all brought back to Thorn Chapel, and you kind of follow what happens. Now, the main heroine in this story, her reasoning for wanting to go back to Thorn Chapel is because her mother went missing, and this Thorn Chapel was the last place that she was ever seen. So she's going there to try and see if she can solve the mystery. Now, this is BDSM, very soft BDSM. There's a menage, there is LGBTQ representation. This has a lot of things in it. I thought it was so good. Technically, I think it would be considered a dark romance, but I absolutely love this, and I cannot wait to start the next book in the series because it kind of ends, not necessarily on a cliffhanger, but kind of, so I can't wait to continue with this series. Next, I read Boyfriend Material by Alexis Hall. This one I DNF'd at 15%. This I just didn't like, to be honest. The main character, Luke, he was too prickly for me, and I really just couldn't stand it, and there were too many elements that I didn't like for me to continue reading it. So what really made me decide to stop reading it was it's fake dating, and Luke goes on this date with this other guy to see about fake dating him, pretty much. And he's just rude. He's just flat out rude to the guy, and like won't even give him a chance to even be like civil. I don't know. I just couldn't stand it. I did not like the way he was behaving, and I just couldn't get behind it and didn't care enough to continue reading it. So I DNF'd it. Next, I read Kill Switch by Penelope Douglas. This is the 3rd book in the Devil's Night series, and this one I gave 4 stars. This one was set very much in the past. Like it has flashbacks, so obviously we have present time and then we keep switching back to the past. And all of the books in the Devil's Night series have that, where they switch back and forth. But this one had way more than the others did, and it was necessary. I understand why it did. You needed it. But I just don't like that much. I don't like to continue to go back to the past because it's the past. And like, I don't really care. Like, yes, it progressed the story because you found out things that you needed to know for the present time, but I just prefer present storylines because the past, it's like, I know it's still going to end up to where we're at now. So like, just tell me what happened. Don't continue to send me back to the past. I don't know. But I mean, I still liked it. I'm still going to continue on with the series and read the last book, which is the 4th one. There are 2 novellas in this series, and I'm not going to read them just because this series is not my favorite series by any means. I still enjoy it, but the books are really long, and like each one gets longer and longer. And obviously the novellas are not very long, but I just don't want to read them. I've got too many other series that I'm trying to work my way through to add 2 little novellas to a series. That's not my favorite, so I won't be reading those, but I will be reading Nightfall, which is the last book in the series. Next, I read Right by Jana Aston. This is Cafe number 2. So the first book in the series was Wrong. I absolutely loved Wrong. I think I gave it 4.5 stars. I gave Right 5 stars. I loved this book. This is an adult rom-com, and this is about this girl who has her sights set on her brother's best friend. And she has, since she was like 6 years old, she's super aggressive about it. And he really kind of tries to avoid her. He doesn't reciprocate the feelings. He doesn't really want anything to do with her. And she just keeps at it until something happens. And she ends up having to go back to her college with someone else. Like, they drive together. And I'm not going to tell you who it is because I feel like that's kind of part of the fun part, but she ends up having a romance with that person. The romance is not with her brother's best friend. So I loved this book. Absolutely read it. I would recommend reading the first one first. I mean, you can get away with reading them out of order, but you get some of the backstory and you kind of get some insight on who the heroine is in the first book and like her personality and things like that. So I definitely recommend reading the first one. Plus the first one is just super good. So definitely read this series if you haven't. I absolutely love it. Next, I read The Deception by Nikki Sloan. This is the 3rd book in the Filthy Rich Americans series. I liked how this trilogy concluded. Now, she did go on to continue the series, and there's one more that's been published, and I think one more that will be published this year. I will not be continuing on because the 4th book in the series is following McAllister, who I mentioned in my last video is like my least favorite character ever. I don't like him. I don't care about his story, like at all. I just don't like him. However, I did like the 3rd book, The Deception. I liked how it ended. I liked the twists and turns that kind of happened. I thought it was a good conclusion to a trilogy. So I would definitely recommend at least reading the first 3 in this series. I think it's fun. Like I said, there is some things in it that are kind of gross, that are bordering on non-consensual that happen in the first couple books. And I don't really like that, but I was able to look past it because the rest of the book was super interesting. It definitely keeps you reading and keeps you wanting to know more. So if you've been curious about it, I would definitely at least read the first 3. I can't speak on the last 2 because I won't be continuing on with it, but it's still worth it. Next, I read American King, which is New Camelot Trilogy number 3. This is by Sierra Simone. I gave this one 4 stars. So this one I really liked as well. There were a couple twists and turns in this that I was not expecting at all. And there is a supernatural element that happens at the end that I was never going to expect to happen. So this one I liked a little bit more than I liked American Prince, which is the 2nd book in the series. That one, there were some things that didn't sit right with me and I gave it 3.5 stars, but this one I gave 4. Again, American Queen is my favorite because that one I gave 5 stars. I think it's the best one in the trilogy, but definitely read it if you haven't. It's one that is a little bit heavier, a little bit more emotional than I was expecting, but still a super good series. Next, I read Love Hacked by Penny Reed. This is Knitting in the City number 3. This whole series I have read out of order, so you don't need to read them in order. I think it always benefits to read books in series in order, but I have not read any of these in order and it's been fine. So this one is about this psychotherapist who goes on a whole bunch of dates and ends up making all of them cry. And she takes them all to the same restaurant. And she's super attracted to the waiter that always serves her when she goes to this restaurant. And she ends up having an encounter with him. And that starts a romance between her and the waiter. So this one was really interesting. There is a bit of mystery to the waiter for quite some time. So I'm not going to tell you really anything more about the book because I don't want to spoil anything. And I found it really fun to try to figure out what the heck was going on with this waiter, like with this man. What is he doing? What is he hiding? Why is he sneaking around? Things like that. I thought it was super fun. So for sure, read this series. Again, you don't have to read it in order, but all of them are super fun and I like every book that I've read so far in this series. Next, I read The Beast by J.R. Ward. This is the 14th book in the Black Dagger Brotherhood series. This one I cried happy tears in, and I don't ever cry happy tears. So this one I loved. I gave this one 4 stars though, not 5, but still absolutely loved it. I will 100% be continuing on with the series. I love all of these books, and mainly because, like, obviously there's multiple elements in each book that determine whether or not I like it, but they all have such good found family, all of them. And they all have absolutely worshiping heroes. Every like man pretty much in this Black Dagger Brotherhood world, the good guys anyway, think that women just walk on water and are the greatest, most precious things on the planet. And obviously as a woman, I love to read about that. So I love this series, will continue on and read the 15th one next month. Next, I read Twisted Pride by Cora Reilly. This is the Cora Chronicles #3. This one I gave 4 stars. So this is my least favorite so far out of the 3 that I've read in this series. And I wanted it to be my most favorite because it's about the leader of the Cora, the capo, and he's like the most ruthless, cold-hearted guy of them all, obviously, because he's like the leader of them. And it's a romance with him and another girl, and it's a captor-captive romance. So I wanted to love this the most, and I didn't. I still gave it 4 stars. Still super good, still would recommend it, but it just wasn't my favorite of the series, and that's okay. And the last book that I read the first half of July was How to Walk Away by Catherine Center. This book I gave 4 stars. I originally gave it 3.5 stars, and after like a day or 2 of thinking about it, I went back and bumped it up to 4 stars because I think looking at it like objectively, it is a very good book. I just either wasn't in the right headspace when I read it, or I listened to the audiobook all in one day. So because it's a little bit heavier, maybe listening to it all at one time, like all in one go, was too much. I'm not sure, but after looking back on it, I realized, yeah, I did enjoy that more than I originally thought. So I bumped it up to 4 stars. But this is about this woman who gets in a plane crash with her fiance. He's the pilot flying the plane, and they get in a plane crash, and she ends up being severely injured, and he comes out scot-free. He doesn't get hurt at all. And so you follow her journey through physical therapy and things like that in the hospital, and what subsequently happens because of that with her and her fiance, and whether or not they're gonna stay together, and whether or not she's gonna be able to find love again with him or with someone else. So this one is a good book. It's Catherine Center, so it's a little bit heavier, a little deeper than like your feel-good type romance. But I still would recommend it if it's something that you think you would like, because it was a good book. It wasn't my favorite, but it's definitely good. And like I said, it's more emotional. So if you're looking for something that's a little bit more emotional with a little bit more depth to it, definitely give this one a shot. But those are all the books that I have read so far this month. Let me know if you've read any of them, or if you plan to read any of them. I would love to hear your thoughts. And hopefully next time Sebastian cooperates and doesn't cause a ruckus, so I don't have to hold him the whole time, because he is heavy and my arms are getting tired. So, but that is everything for me this time. I will see you all next time. Bye.